Okay, so thank you very much. We just had a wonderful discussion in the breakout group that I was part of, and I assume that the discussions were equally fruitful in the other breakout groups. So now what we're going to do is to have some reporting back to the plenary, and we're very grateful for the moderators that participated in each of the breakout groups. And why don't we start with the one I was at with Darla Shum as the leader of that discussion, and with Kayla Grant as moderator. So Kayla, if you don't mind sort of reporting back on some of the notes that you took, please.
Yeah, hi. So we had a really interesting conversation about kind of othering and how society perceives disability. We discussed quite a bit about kind of the concept of supercrip, which Darla didn't bring up in her presentation. She actually cut it for time, I believe. So just kind of a similar concept to the state, but that people with disabilities have like kind of superpowers, and how that is perceived by the religious community and the society at large. So we had a brief conversation kind of about inspiration porn and how that's viewed at large. The other thing that we kind of looked at was, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here. We discussed the intersection of disability and feminism, and some of the key authors that are within that kind of field, and how ableism kind of looks at how bodies are superior in some way, and that in a way that we also see that in sexism as well, and misogyny, this idea that different bodies are superior in other ways. So that was a really interesting conversation. And then we also talked about kind of materialist feminist theory, the concept of the misfit, and how this evens the playing field amongst people that are able-bodied versus people with disabilities, as well as the different types of disabilities between physical and intellectual disabilities as well. And then we also talked about the concept of how the International Humanitarian Law, if it's maybe perhaps too late. So it's always kind of coming in after conflict, and whether there was anything we can do that would be more preventative, in which we discussed the importance of political will and norm making, and how that can affect kind of discussions around protecting people from disabilities or protecting people in conflict. I think I was trying to organize my notes before we jumped on, but you beat me to it. So if I'm missing anything, Caesar, please feel free to add on.
Thank you so much, Kayla. I would not add anything. I think it was a very thorough summary and also a reflection of a very rich discussion. So thank you so much for that. There was another breakout group that with Seth Ratzcliffe as moderator, and Seth, please, if you can tell us what your group discussed.
Thanks, Caesar. We actually had a participant in the group who volunteered to report. The participant's name is Erin Quinn. If we could unmute Erin and start her video.
Absolutely, welcome, Erin, please. And this is Sarah Murray's, by the way. This is a group that was discussing with Sarah as leader there. So, Erin, please, the floor is yours.
So yeah, we had a really interesting conversation. We talked a little bit with Sarah just about her backgrounds and her passion, how she kind of got started in the field. We talked a lot about kind of like different things regarding international law, international humanitarian law, and the implementation of that, and how it's been kind of adjusted in the modern world to include people with disabilities. So we talked a little bit about accountability and how the CRPD is going to kind of hopefully help with accountability of states on an international level. We talked a lot about just kind of the importance of patience and the importance of continuity with this type of project. Recognizing that change really doesn't happen overnight, and the important change will often come with time and with consistent implementation and ratification of conventions. Sarah mentioned kind of a few different hopeful aspects of the CRPD in talking about how it was very widely adopted by various states and various NGOs. We talked a little bit about how behavior changes from government is really important to touch on. So how while we aren't necessarily seeing evidence of enforcement on the ground just yet, we know that in the Red Cross and in UN peacekeeping, making or just kind of like making space for people with disabilities is kind of being talked about, and it's on the docket, which is something that we can hope to continue to see in various other NGOs. And then ideally, eventually, those types of conversations will be transitioned into action plans that will happen on the ground. We talked a little bit about just kind of how it's difficult to get statistics and accurate reportings when people with disabilities are the main focus, because just very often the way in which data is collected is not always accessible to people with disabilities. So in terms of the actual industry, it can be quite difficult to accurately research and accurately kind of reflect on these findings. And then we ended off our conversation with discussing what it's like in Canada and how Canada has worked to implement the CRPD at home, which includes the kind of welcoming of people with disabilities to the table. So I would say that would be another really key takeaway, is just the importance of including those who are impacted by the necessary change in the making of that change, so that it can really actually be appropriately integrated, and that tangible solutions are realized for just like an overall positive impact. So yeah, if anyone else wants to add anything about what we talked about, but it was a really great conversation.
Thank you so much, Erin. Sounds like a great conversation, and I'm especially glad that you brought it to a domestic Canadian context, because of course it's relevant to many of us who are joining here from Canada. So that's great, and how the CRPD is being taken embraced here in Canada. So thank you very much. The next breakout group was the one led by Major Mayu, and I think Major Mayu himself is going to report back to the plenary. So the floor is yours, please.
Yes, so thank you very much for this opportunity, Cesar. Appreciate it very much. We talked about the difference in the perceptions. Again, I think it's a theme that comes rather in many plenary sessions about the perception of disabilities. The physical one, a little bit easier, but also the mental one, which is always another dimension and much harder. Perception of what people are able to do, what we think they should be or not be doing is always something we put on them. And the fact that nowadays we keep having to challenge these perceptions because of technology, because of people's willingness and people and the ability of society to accommodate these people. So we constantly have to challenge our perception. I think I have the right crowd to make that comment here, but it's to share this around as well across society, and if you can, make writings that will probably support this. I think it's a great point that perception will be a key challenge to this. One of the other points, and I didn't have time to speak about it, that was brought by one of the questions, was the power of sports to help disabilities. I was lucky to be a participant in Invictus Games. Some people may have heard about it. I was Prince Harry that founded the games that are basically helping wounded soldiers and showcase their abilities through international game sports in good spirits. This has a great way of showcasing and fighting that perception. But at the same time, they also give great confidence to people in what they're able to do and what they can achieve. Sometimes you are afraid of pain. You are afraid of making mistakes, falling. Trust me, when you have one leg, running again is a challenge in perception and what you can accomplish. But if you start playing volleyball instead, you stop thinking about that. You just do the game. So it is a very effective way of getting people back in great spirits. So I would probably offer that to heal a lot of people from conflicts, Sometimes the best way would be to reintegrate some of these people through sports and through physical fitness and to physical rehabilitation at large. Haiti is suffering right now from a lot of people from earthquakes that have been losing limbs and have little access to healthcare. And sometimes we may be thinking that what they need is not more hospitals, but maybe more access to sports and challenges that may help them rehabilitate. I mean, there's a balance of everything, but a broader scope of thinking might help. Anyway, that was quickly what we can have. There was more to say, but I don't want to steal too much time. Thank you, Caesar.
Thanks once again to you, and once again, very inspiring. You know, everything that you have said today. I do remember the Invictus. This would have been 3-4 years ago, correct?
2017. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Okay, so you were part of that yourself.
I was team captain for Team Canada.
Not only part of it, team captain. Okay, very impressive, very cool, wonderful. Sounds like it. We had another breakout group discussing under the leadership of Alma Alosta, and I believe David Yoon is going to provide a summary right now. Thank you, David. Please take the floor.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And I am delighted to share with respect to our conversation in the breakout room, and also happy to echo the sentiments of earlier presenters that the discussion was open and engaging. And I guess it's a tough act to follow the team captain of Team Canada, but I'll give it a shot. So we began with the brief overview of HI, and we soon delved into conversation. And I guess the biggest overarching theme was balance with respect to a variety of facets. So first, balance in managing expectations between armed forces and players in the game, such as NGOs. We have to factor in realism, and oftentimes if there's a conflict between different schools of thought, no progress can be made ultimately. So trying to counteract that and meet a melding of the minds with respect to managing expectations. And this also flows into considering non-state actors and PMCs, which was an excellent question, because when categorizing how to approach this problem, it's not just a binary thing where we have those who want to accomplish the eradication of certain uses of weapons and those who want to continue using them, but rather it's a much more complex issue, and that was an excellent point. And that flowed into a discussion of the treatment of victims without regard for how they sustain their injuries, which branched off a question of how do we approach then, for instance, I believe the question pertained to suicide bombers. We received a great question as well pertaining to illicitly trafficked explosive devices and what that looks like in HI's work in the region. And the conversation there also hinged on balance, where if these weapons aren't coming in, they might be received elsewhere. So again, managing expectations. And lastly, where our conversation ended in terms of the questions from the audience was approaching the difficulty of access. We want to be able to provide help in the region, but sometimes and oftentimes access is difficult, if not outright impossible. So managing and balancing the expectation of we want to help, but how do we then work with the relevant parties in order to get impartial third parties into the region to provide that help? And again, providing help with impartiality in mind as to how they sustain their injuries is irrelevant. What we want to do is help in the end. And lastly, the most pertinent point was how to get involved. So it's great to learn about this here in Canada or wherever you're tuning in from. And I do want to note a special thank you to everyone who is international, right? Like, as Alma mentioned, it's almost evening in Belgium. So, but how do we get involved here? And I guess the biggest thing that Alma pointed out was a takeaway for me as a student was to get involved at the policy level, that if you truly care about something, let people know. And I think it's insufficient, just speaking personally, to have this opinion and keep it in like my own brain, but rather reach out to MPs, reach out to MPPs, and let them know that this is an issue that truly matters. Because the point that was raised is perhaps Canada is not the most consistent with respect to its voicing its support for specific initiatives. And if you truly care, and it's great to see so many people, so many participants today, if you care, reach out and let your voice be heard, get involved civically. And that's, I think, the biggest takeaway and so important. Thank you for allowing me to share. And was there anything else that I missed in our breakout session that I didn't touch on?
Sounds like a
No? Thank you
sounds like
so
a
much,
great
guys.
summary. David,
Thank you.
thanks to you. That was a great summary. And like you said, you know, what we want to do in the end is to help these people. So that's I think a great point to make. And last, Catherine Gribbin's breakout group had their discussions. I think Laszlo was the moderator. Laszlo Sarkani was the moderator for that breakout group. So Laszlo, if you can please share with the plenary some of the points made there.
Yes, many thanks, Caesar. I'd like to pass the word over to Breanna Palmer, who will be our rapporteur.
Indeed, Breanna, please.
Yes, thank you. Hi. So I took some notes, but we talked about the language and also about systemic discrimination in accessing healthcare, where disability, age, gender, ethnicity, and health status can also play a part, and also how disability. Oops, I just see about my video here, but also about how disability affects both your mind and your body. So it could be a mental or a physical, and then what constitutes being fit for work or redeployment, but also the level or the threshold in which IHL would apply to conflict or all wars, and then further aggravated by COVID and how we are in the land of COVID now. And then we talked about the legal and political responses and how words become definitions, and definitions then translate to meaning in which to interpret the law. And then we talked about laws, but also the language in treaties, but then looking at the ICC and disability law, and actually how refugees, the definition of refugees includes the environmental and climate change. So how does that factor in? But then also within the ICC, there's the customary law and the Rome law and the international tribunals. And there's the obligations and provisions to provide humanitarian assistance on the one hand, the immediate needs, and on the other, the obligations, rehabilitative and prevention. And then Catherine provided Janet Lord as a scholarly resource in which to visit more. And then she offered an example of, in Afghanistan, they inverted the health system, where it was not for lack of providing a healthcare system, but rather the mobility. So people were disabled, so they were not able to actually get to the health unit. So they mobilized and went out to go find the people. So I don't know if I messed that up or articulated that properly. Maybe Catherine, can you help? Thanks.
Thanks to you, Breanna.
No, fantastic.
Yeah, it sounded very well articulated to me. So thank you and clear. And thanks to you. And Catherine, thanks to all the moderators and to all the leaders, I mean, for your expertise and for your time. We have just a few minutes before we proceed to the closing of the conference, but I'm happy to open the floor to anyone who promises to make their comments, in less than 1 minute or so. But if anyone wants to complement what has been heard from the moderators, or just add any reactions or comments, this would be the time to do so. And then we do have not a lot of flexibility, but we have just a few minutes for a couple of comments, if there are any.
I'll jump in. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the workshop today. I really learned a lot, and I appreciate the speakers and learning.
Wonderful. Thank you for saying that. Doesn't seem like it. So that brings us to the last part of the conference, and then we're going to hear a few words from Svetlana from the Canadian Red Cross, who will give a few closing remarks. And it just hit me right this moment that I never introduced myself when I first spoke. So if you're wondering who this random guy who keeps taking the floor is, I'm Cesar Jaramillo. I'm the executive director of Project Plowshares, one of the organizers of this event. I'm very pleased to have worked with the other institutions who came together for this. So with that, thanks again. And Svetlana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Cesar. So my name is Svetlana Agayeva, IHL advisor at the Canadian Red Cross Society. And I joined this conference from Mississauga, Ontario, Canada. And looking at the time, we have unfortunately reached the end of our event in its question and answer period. On behalf of the Canadian Red Cross and all of its partners, I want to give my deepest thanks to the speakers for sharing their time, wisdom, and insights with us this afternoon. And to all our participants at home for tuning in and asking some excellent and thought-provoking questions. I'm sure everyone benefited from today's interactions. Our 5th annual IHL Waterloo Conference was held online this year and couldn't have been possible without our partners, Balsillie School of International Affairs, Project Plowshares, University of Waterloo Peace and Conflict Studies, Conrad Grebel University College at the University of Waterloo, Wilfrid Laurier University, and International Committee of the Red Cross. Other special thank yous would go to Professor Arlene Cantor, who was our keynote speaker last night, as well as Professor David Crane, who spoke at our annual IHL Waterloo Conference last year and introduced us to Arlene's work and Arlene herself, as well as original members of the conference organizing committee, Professor Lowell Ewart from University of Waterloo and Professor Edmund Priest from Laurier University. Please note also that this conference has been recorded and will be posted to both the Balsillie's and Red Cross YouTube channels later on this week. And please consider evaluating your experience with us today by visiting Slido evaluation and event code #IHL Waterloo. And we hope to see you all again soon. And until then, take care.